Hello, Space Junkies, and welcome to episode 153 of What a Piece of Junk, the Star Wars show here on the Fandom Podcast Network. I am your agreeable host, Scott Butman, and joining me to talk a little hodgepodge or perhaps galactic potpourri of Star Wars news and commentary is my original podcast co-pilot, Mr. Derrick Marsh. Derrick, how's it going?
Pretty good. Long time no talk, at least in the podcasting world. Since it's been nice. It's been quiet for a little bit. Taking a break since we finished the Acolyte and some other things out there in the Star Wars world. And we'll talk about trying to catch up a little bit for the month of September as we prep for Skeleton Crew.
That's right. Yes, and we did finish our discussion of the Acolyte, and it looks like we are almost totally all done with the Acolyte, barring some perhaps novel or comic thing, because the Acolyte is not coming back for Season 2, just in case anybody out there hasn't already been made aware of that. But one person who's definitely aware of it and not happy about it at all is my original Wookiee co-pilot, our very own Dave Filclone, the man of 1,000 nicknames, Nathan Miracle. Nathan, how's the grumpy, gooey, chewy doing out there?
Grumpy. Very, very grumpy. Yes, because I am not happy that Acolyte is not being renewed. But, we'll talk about that a little bit later. Probably not
I am
in-depth,
inclined. I'm inclined to agree with you. I could see this as a kind of thing that might get revisited as a comic book or maybe a novel someday.
Yeah.
But hey, if you had asked me in 1984 if we'd ever get another Star Wars theatrical movie, I would have been like, what? No, you're crazy. Star Wars is over. Return of the Jedi, that's it. Boy, was I wrong. In fact, that's less than 1/3 of total Star Wars films now, counting theatrical releases. But be that as it may, the Acolyte is done, but Star Wars sure ain't done. We've got a whole new show coming out soon, as Derrick just mentioned. It's Star Wars Skeleton Crew. And guys, this is merging two of my favorite ideas in all of sci-fi. Star Wars and space pirates, apparently. We had
Goonies.
some new... That's it, Space Goonies, yes, which, Goonies is a pirate movie, for those who don't remember. We have some new images that have been released as teasers for Skeleton Crew. So I'm going to go ahead and attempt to do a shared slideshow of them here by sharing the screen of my computer. Bear with us, those of you who are much more internet savvy than the three old guys in the cockpit here of the Drunken Gungan. I think this is going to work. Hey, all right, there we go.
Hooray!
So yeah, now some of these you may have seen already because, as Derrick mentioned, we've taken a little bit of a hiatus. Hats off to Commander Kyle and Kevin and Derrick for doing episode 152, where they talked about stuff that was revealed at D23. But Nathan and I haven't had a chance to offer our commentary on these photos. This is exactly what it advertises on the tin, as they say. It is Goonies in space here. We've got Jude Law sitting in front of some computer console with 3 or 4 precocious urchins perched around him that are probably trying to tell him that he is a crazy old man and that they, as kids, know a whole lot more about what's really going on. If I could look at the face of the little lady there to the right wearing what looks like a Star Wars bomber jacket, pretty cool, she has a look on her face like, you're a crazy old man, I know what I'm talking about.
Yes, always.
Okay, boomer.
Yes. Space
Okay,
Boomer. Wait, no,
Grandpa,
that's Star Trek.
Grandpa
That's Star Trek.
Jedi.
You fought in the Clone Wars? Wasn't that a really, 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 really long time ago?
All right. I do enjoy the blonde-haired girl in the back with the visor. She's a part nod to Geordi LaForge from Star Trek The Next Generation, but also a little bit like Lieutenant Detmer from Star Trek Discovery. But I have to say, she doesn't strike me much as a Star Wars-looking character. Perhaps a little bit of Lobot. Maybe a little Lobot.
Yeah, and there's been a couple other characters with Lobot-like cybernetics on, but usually not in front of the eyes in Star Wars.
Yeah.
But isn't there in SWTOR? Wasn't there a cyborg class? Or no?
Yes, definitely in SWTOR. You could be a cyborg as a race. And
Couldn't
you could
you?
get a lot of ocular implants.
Yeah.
But normally they were, eyeballs with like laser pupils or something like that. Not much in the way of visors. I think there may have been one or two.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure it was in the cosmetic section or marketplace or whatever, but I was pretty sure that I thought I saw something like that. I mean, obviously, definitely Geordie LaForge vibes for sure, right?
Yeah.
But you have to remember too. Did we see anything in Book of Boba, right? When there was a lot of that introduction of the cyborgs.
The mods.
the mods.
Yeah.
So I'm just trying to remember if there was some stuff in that various scenes with whatever his name was. The DJ, whatever, I can't remember.
Thundercat.
Thundercat.
Right?
Thank you.
Yeah,
Yes.
Thundercat. Yeah.
So
The mod squad may have had ocular visors. Yeah.
One of them, it wasn't a visor. One of them had something over one eye.
okay.
Okay.
So still an ocular thing, just not a straight visor. This is ripped straight from Geordie LaForge. It's practically a headband that they've put over the eyes.
Yeah.
all
I
good.
love there's a really old joke from the 1990s about Geordie's visor in Space Quest 6, the irreverent series of sci-fi lampooning adventure game from the erstwhile Sierra Online. And as Roger Wilco, the main character of Space Quest 6, you find yourself in a docking bay where there's a bunch of iconic spacecraft parked, and one of them is a shuttlecraft from the USS Enterprise D. And when you walk over there and click on it, the narrator says, "Some guy wearing an AC Delco air filter on his face parked this here 3 weeks ago, and he hasn't come back to check on it."
That's funny.
Sounds right.
I always, even though it's a banana clip, like canonically we know that they used a hair clip, I always look at it and think AC Delco air filter.
There you go.
Yeah.
And then we got
Anyway,
Mac Rebo Jr. going on over here.
I love Max Rebo
Yeah.
Jr. in this picture because I have just now noticed he has little blue hair that is
does.
perfectly parted like every other young third grade boy for school picture day. Look at that. That's awesome.
So why does Max Rebo not have hair? Is he just bald? Does his species ortolans
He's old.
get bald?
He- That's what I'm saying. He's old. He's old.
Yeah, he could be old man Max Rebo. We just don't know his age at this point. So
That's
Or maybe
that's
living
my
on
theory, and I'm sticking
Tatooine
to it.
has just caused his hair to fall out.
well, think
Yeah,
about
he's
it.
done.
Scorched.
They typically are in cold weather, right? So he probably sheds his hair like every animal does when they're, to your point, in hot weather. So
That's a good question. I know
maybe he
in-
shaves it with a razor.
Could be.
He's
but
a
I know-
musician. He's edgy.
There. I know in Legends they are from a cold planet. I don't know if that has carried over into canon or not, into the Disney canon.
That's a good question.
So this may be a chance for us to find out, do they actually come from a cold planet? I kind of
I want to know,
It seemed like they should.
is this Ortulan kid gonna be able to somehow speak Basic, or are we just gonna get a whole lot of?
I hope we
And
get a
then,
lot
like,
of
one of the other kids is going to be all, "Yeah, Rebo Jr.'s right. You're the worst ex-Jedi we've ever met."
or we
And
get
then Jude
subtitles.
Law we might get subtitles. That would be kind of cool.
Maybe, but I mean,
All
it's
right.
a Star Wars tradition to have a character that you can't understand. R2-D2
That's true.
and Chewbacca did that.
Yeah, but we got Jabba the Hutt too. So
Oh.
Well, that's a good point. Yeah.
All right, let's
We
move on to the
subtitle
next
the bad
photo.
guys, not the good guys.
I mean,
That's
to
it.
be fair, he has a lot of dialogue, so there's a good chance. But yes, I mean, you're absolutely right with Chewbacca. We get the same thing with, like I said, a newer tradition with the Young Jedi Adventures with the little blue Ewok, Chewie Nubs
Nubs.
character. So same thing there. So I agree with you. I hope we don't. But like I said, I do hope we get the the little toots and noises. So
Yeah. All right, next picture, we've got Jude Law with, rough and tumble scarf, because apparently that's how you roll when you are British guy in Star Wars. And then this is clearly one of those Ichuta type extending, greeting droid things in front of some door. There might actually be two of them. I'm not sure what this is up here. But he
Probably.
is talking to somebody, trying to turn on the charm to get admitted into some place where he probably shouldn't be admitted. That's exactly what this looks like here. And I'm all for it. I think we may be wrong. I think Jude Law might not be former Jedi. I think he might just be ne'er-do-well guy.
Well,
that's what I hope.
The way the trailer ends, though, is that you're supposed to think he's a Jedi. So he could not be, to your point, but at the same time, he could be because that's what they're alluding to. So,
but he could also be
a
con man pretending to be a Jedi.
Yeah, but all Jedi
which we've had
like
set
hobos,
up.
So
that's true. But we've had that set up pretty well thanks to Andor. No, wait, sorry, Obi-Wan.
No, it was Kenobi.
Or Kenobi, yeah. Where I can't pronounce that guy's name. The guy
I've
from
forgotten that
Eternals.
guy's name. I know exactly who you're talking about.
yeah, from Eternals and
Nujal. I can't say it.
Yeah, Namar, Nujal. Either way.
Yeah, anyhow, that guy was doing the whole I'm a Jedi, but really he was not and was, using gadgets and trickery. I could see Jude Law being a similar kind of character. Especially that keeps with our whole quasi-crime, outside the law, storyline with pirates and smugglers and so forth.
So looking at the background, it's definitely looks like a desert planet. And with the way the lights are, it could be they're back on Tatooine. So maybe they're going to go see a hut.
It could be that they're on Tatooine. But this is, unless Boba Fett has added some lights out in front of what was formerly known as Jabba's palace, I don't think that he's going to Boba Fett's palace.
But he doesn't have to go to Boba Fett's palace. He can go anywhere, because that could just be the Tatooine security system.
Yeah.
That some guy sells at a door-to-door salesman.
Yes. Yeah. Although they used that security system on Navarro in Mandalorian.
They did,
right?
yeah.
Because they had that thing when he went to go see Werner Herzog.
Yeah, I think it may be a very common thing in the Star Wars universe, and I don't think this necessarily means he's on Tatooine. I think he might be on Nal Hutta.
That would be cool.
That'd be neat. All right, moving right along.
But can they breathe the gas on Nal Hutta? They can. The air they can breathe.
Possibly.
I'm pretty sure.
It
I'll double
depends.
check.
They may have cleaned up the atmosphere on the planet, or the moon, I should say. And here we have my favorite image that has been released so far, because it literally is kids on bikes in space. Yes, kids on bikes in space. They even have walkie-talkies. Look at that. Their communicators have antenna. Good times.
And the Ortolan's feet are conveniently hidden so that we don't have to put makeup on them.
I want one of these hover bikes. Shoot, 9-year-old me desperately wants one of these hover bikes.
Definitely.
Look at the tassels on their handlebars. I just noticed that.
It's 1980s in the Star Wars galaxy.
It's exactly what it is.
Might be 1970s. But yeah,
it's a Stranger Things vibe too. So.
It is
absolutely.
And
this is in
definitely
keeping with
the. It's on purpose.
Yeah, the atmosphere in the trailer where we saw basically suburbia, So I like.
Yeah, that's the only scene that's been throwing me off. Right, is that version of what it looks like? Just because the way we've seen the rest of the Star Wars worlds, right, with like even Navarro and Tatooine and where was Andor taking place on? But anyways, they're more like clay brick buildings. They're not fancy things. Like you see that in Coruscant. So again, it could be a uppity high populated area, right? That's with rich people. That's where the rich people live that don't live in Coruscant, right? So it's possible. Yeah. It's still that's the only thing that throws me off in the trailer for like the first 10 seconds, right? Because you get that overview scene. But once you get past that, the rest of the trailer I was excited for.
Yeah, totally. All right. Let's move on. Okay, so here we have the kids with flashlights exploring I'm assuming exploring the ship that they find, because we know that they find a ship that's like either crashed or wrecked or what have you, and that's how they accidentally get off their home planet.
It's a 2-1B droid.
Yes, there, or something like it. It might be the droid from the poster.
Oh, that's right.
It
Where
might
it's
be. I can't. You might be right though, Derek. I can't really tell. It's really hard to tell from this angle, and it's dark, and so on and so forth.
A 2-1B
but
droid would make some sense though, because I could see somebody getting injured, and oh no, we have to leave this character on the ship for a little bit.
Yeah, I love the 1980s looking flashlights the kids have here too. I mean, those are like incandescent bulb, battery powered, D cell battery powered flashlights, maybe C cell. They're not LED flashlights like we use today. They are not Star Trek-y flashlights. These are like 20th century Earth flashlights.
Do you think they'll do a meta scene where they're pretending they're lightsabers?
That would be so
I
cute.
bet so.
Yeah, that would be awesome. But I do love the idea that Visor Girl here still needs a flashlight. Because if you look behind our Artulian's shoulder, she has
she's
a
not
flashlight
Daredevil,
just
is
like
what
the
you're
rest of them.
saying.
She's not Daredevil,
and her visor,
and her visor doesn't do infrared or night vision or whatever, you know.
Yeah, because Geordi didn't need any sort of, he could work in very low light things. I mean, he still had to have information getting to the visor, but you could be in a completely dark room and he'd be fine because he sees differently. But apparently, her visor doesn't do that.
Well, I don't know. She's not really holding. I mean, I guess maybe if it's behind the Ortilian. I'm just trying to see if
if you
the
look,
light.
You can see the light coming from behind.
Yeah, but is that one, or is that enough reflection from the other light that the other girl's holding?
No, that is definitely
it
from.
looks to me like there are beams of light coming from it. Man, aren't we leaning into our Star Wars podcaster cliches here of literally analyzing every pixel of this pre-release image? But that's the kind of scintillating content you find here on the Fandom Podcast Network. All right, but yes, I love the scene here of the kids in the dark with flashlights poking around, essentially a grave, because this droid might as well be dead. He may as well be a skeleton.
He's a skeleton,
right?
yeah.
Yeah. And so it's very, very much got the Goonies vibe.
Maybe it's 2-1-R.
Instead of B. Sure.
All right, moving on. Now, this is the picture I really wanted to discuss, because this has almost immediately been released. I think it's actually been out for about 2 weeks at the time of this recording. But it's from Entertainment Weekly's Fall TV Preview for 2024, because Skeleton Crew does indeed count as part of the fall season, coming out at the beginning of December, right? Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah. And technically, we are in fall as of today. We are recording this on the 22nd. Fall started this morning, even though it's like 90 degrees outside.
Yeah. So yeah, we're looking at a motley crew of, or perhaps a wretched hive of scum and villainy with a group of space pirates, including, what did you say this guy's name was, Nathan, from The Mandalorian Season 3?
His name is Vane, Vane.
Yeah, Vane is there. I think he is essentially a Klatooinian. Is that what he's supposed to be?
I can't remember if he's a Klatooinian or a Nikto.
Yeah, he's something like that as a nod to Jabba's palace aliens from the 1980s. But of course, we remember him from The Mandalorian. Nikto, thank you, Nikto. We remember him from The Mandalorian because he was one of the guys who was flying the starfighter craft for the pirate lord.
He was the only one that survived, right?
Yes, the pirate lord who was basically a big moss monster.
Swamp
whose name
Thing.
I cannot remember. Yeah, Swamp Thing, the pirate king. He was chasing down Mando when Mando was flying his silver N1 starfighter. And as we pointed out, he just defeated all the other ships, but Vane escaped, a la Vader in A New Hope, where the whole base gets blown up, but he flees.
And he's back,
of course.
Yeah,
just like Vader.
And now he's back, and he's perhaps has gone to find this group of pirates as a way to go and look for Mando to get revenge.
Vane's escape, though, was way more, I'm out, because you're going to shoot me. Vader's escape was, I wrecked and I'm spinning off, and just no one picked him up and shot him. How different would Star Wars be if Wedge had just gone, oh, I should shoot that one random TIE fighter that's spinning out of control?
Yeah. Yeah.
But
anyway,
yes,
but back to the
extra.
image at hand. I dig all of these space pirates, and just now looking at this blown up on the large screen here, have I noticed that the three-eyed alien from Jabba's palace has the equivalent of a three-eyed alien eye patch?
He is a two-eyed alien who
Yes.
used to be a three-eyed alien, and I love it.
Yes.
I love it that we gave a Gran, the three-star,
Grand, thank you.
uh,
Yeah.
an extra. Reese was the name of the
Reese,
Grand
yeah.
Bounty Hunter in Jabba's palace, and in the old Star Wars card game, he was one of my favorites.
He was a good card. He was a good card.
So weird because he was. If you drew a destiny of 3, you could spend 3 to increase it by 3. So convoluted, but the thing I loved about him was the alien symbol for if there was a card that wasn't Imperial or Rebel at that time, had
Or a
Jawa eyes or droid, yeah. And this was before Republic, and his had a third Jawa eye at the top.
Yeah,
It
because
was
he
three
has
eyes.
3 eyes. But it would. But for this particular Grand, the regular Jawa icon would work
2.
because he's only got 2 eyes. You see, eye patch on a Grand. Good times. Also good times. Possibly the return of a Shistavinan Wolfman, if not a Shistavinan Wolfman, at least a lupine-esque species that has the most piratey-looking thing you can have aside from the eye patch. And that is a bandolier with extra pistols, 2 of which look like they might be actual slug thrower flintlock-esque pistols with the curved handles with weights at the end, so that when you finish firing your 1 or possibly 2 shots out of them, you turn them around and start clubbing people in the head with the pistol butt.
Well, I mean, the whole reason that pirates had a whole bunch of pistols is they would pull one out, shoot, discard, pull another one out, and shoot, because it was way quicker to do that than to reload the gunpowder pistols.
Yep. Although our Wolfman pirate, space pirate here, does have a much more revolver-esque and much more laser blaster-looking pistol right in the center of his bandolier.
Yeah, so I'm not sure why he really needs a bunch of pistols, but it looks cool, so who cares why he needs them?
Yeah,
And
my personal headcanon is now that one of these pistols fires some kind of a stun weapon. One of these pistols fires actual lead ball or bullet, an actual slug thrower, as Lando Calrissian was fond of in the original Heir to the Empire series of novels from Timothy Zahn, a slug thrower. And then of course, one of them is, a blaster pistol.
Yeah, so I think that he's a Defil, which is another lupine species. But the shape of the face and the fact that he's so dark lends me to think that he might be a Defil. But there's actually
and the red
a few.
eyes.
Yeah, there's actually a few different wolf species within Star Wars, so we could both be wrong.
Yeah. And of course, they could always have created a new species for Skeleton Crew.
They could have, but since we have a Gran and a Nikto, I'm thinking this is not a new species.
Yeah. And in addition to not a new species, we have a much more Lobot-esque cyborg here with Space Urkel. I mean, Jaleel White as a space pirate. Now, he definitely looks like he came from or bought the same kit as Lobot, because he's got the Lobot-type deal on the sides of his head, and I wouldn't be surprised if it wraps around the back of his head.
He also bought the Wish version of Darth Vader's chest piece.
Yes, the
Yeah,
Wish.com,
very much
or
so.
perhaps the Temu life support system of the Star Wars universe, or and here's a theory: he scavenged this from the corpse of one Saw Gerrera, because it looks a little bit like the pipe and the console thing that Saw had going on too. Although at that time I think we did also describe him as the Wish.com Darth Vader life support system on Saw Gerrera.
Yeah.
But yes, he definitely looks like he's got some kind of a life support or enhancement thing going on with that chest piece with 2 really big buttons. You have to think that this is on and this is off, and you're like, this is bad design, because it just looks like somebody could be in a fight with him and be all like, well, let me just turn off your life support system here and see how well you do.
You say that, and I know that you're joking, but I could see them doing that in this show. That could
Well,
be a way.
The kids are going to need some edge.
Yeah, that could be a way that a kid could take on this pirate and realistically be able to take him out, or at least stun him long enough to get away. Boop! Ah! I can't breathe. Can't breathe.
Yeah, that would be cool. I would dig it. I would be cool with that because it'd be like the kids had sort of outwitted the pirates. Because you
Right.
could easily see Urkel, and I'm sorry, that's what I'm going to call him forever. You could easily see Pirate Urkel holding one of the kids and being like, listen, you little snot, you're going to tell me where the treasure is, or else, and the kids, or else what? Click. You know, his hubris gets the better of him. He underestimates the kid.
As is the way in any of these types of shows.
Yeah. All right.
All right.
And I think, yeah, this is our last picture from the Entertainment Weekly Fall TV Preview 2024. The kids are on the entrance ramp to probably the ship in question that is the Deus Ex Machina, or at least the Machina of, of the whole series. And Jude Law is standing there looking at something quite fearfully. In fact, Jude Law may be getting ready to turn around and run up the ramp and tell the kids, go, 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 because he's got a lot of light on his face, and there may be a ye old Star Wars giant explosion. Shockwave is incoming. Everybody get on the ship and let's fly away at the last second.
Or a giant ship is coming down.
Oh, yeah, or the bad guys are coming down. Yeah.
I'm going to propose an alternate theory here. This shot may not even be in the show. This looks like it could be a shot that was set up specifically for promoting the show.
It could be just a promo image. You're right about that. But do note, we were talking earlier about Wolfman having some piratey flintlock-looking pistols, and Jude Law here definitely has one of those. So maybe we're in some segment of the galaxy where... Oh, dude. We might be in some segment of the galaxy in which blaster weapons are forbidden because they set off weapon detectors and all this stuff. Or maybe there's even a weird planet-wide magnetic field that makes it where blasters don't function. So the pirates have started using old-school slug throwers to get around the anti-blaster tech.
Could be, or we're in a time frame that's a bit undefined right now. Because we're in post-Mandalorian, but not too far post-Mandalorian. The New Republic is still the major power in the galaxy. I could see the New Republic trying some foolish thing like, let's just outlaw all the blasters.
Yeah. That could happen, although, like you say, that would be quite foolish in the Star Wars universe because there are so many blasters.
And people would just switch to slug throwers.
Yeah.
Oh, I love how he
you know,
also has the... Oh, go ahead, Scott.
We were talking about the kids in the trailer seemingly live in this, almost utopia of a suburbia type area. I could see that section being somehow protected from blasters. We have metal detectors at all of our schools. Anyway.
Could be.
I was just going to say, he definitely has the Lando Calrissian shirt on, though.
The vibe, yeah.
Yeah.
If it were yellow, it would be identical.
Further lending weight to my theory that he is not actually a Jedi, but a swindler, con man,
But again,
smooth
that could
operator.
be his undercover thing, right? Because Jedi would still, I mean, right now, not to say they would necessarily be hunted, right? Because this is post, technically, at this point, Emperor is dead second time. And, from there, but yeah.
Well, no, this is post-Emperor is dead just the first time.
Didn't he die
Well,
three
I mean,
times?
The 9th time, if you want to start counting all the way back. I don't know how many iterations we want to go back, but
I'm only counting 2 times with Return of the Jedi and Rise of Skywalker. What's I'm not saying that there's not a third time. It is Palpatine. What are you counting as the other time?
I mean, I'm trying to. Didn't he, quote unquote?
Valkorian died. Then he came back as the next guy. That guy died. Then he came back as. Some people theorize he came back as. Not Sidious. The guy who was Plagueis. Some people think that Plagueis was the Sith Emperor, and then he transferred his consciousness to Palpatine, and then of course Palpatine was all about I'm going to transfer my consciousness again. So, I said, it depends on.
Anyways,
Palpatine himself, I think, only died twice.
Oh, Palpatine himself, but not the Sith Emperor. Okay, yes. I'm going to say twice.
So, and as far as this guy is concerned, the Palpatine is the one who's hunting down and destroying the Jedi, or Vader is on Palpatine's orders. So we're in between the two deaths of Palpatine.
Correct.
Yes, because this happens. We think Skeleton Crew happens concurrently with Mandalorian.
Well, it should because you have Vane.
It has to happen concurrently or shortly after what we have seen.
I mean, it could happen before.
That is true.
Vane might be working with Urkel before he works with Swamp Thing.
I feel like the reason Vane escaped was so that he could be in this.
Yeah.
So
you would think
I'm pretty
that
sure
would
it's
be
set
it, right?
afterwards.
I mean, that'd be such a really weird prequel.
It would be a very convoluted.
Yes.
Do you remember this guy who survived? Well, before he survived.
But wouldn't that be a crazy ending at the end of this? At the end of the show, that Din has to capture Jude Law's character, and he puts him in frozen carbonite, and that's how we have a series finale.
And you see Vane joining up with Captain Mossman.
Yeah.
Oh, what would really be fun is if when the kids get on this ship, that's how they find Grogu, and they drop him off on that planet where IG-11 is trying to find him.
Okay, we've gone way off the deep end in speculation here. I think it is 9 times more likely that this is just set after Mando season 3.
So you're saying there's a chance?
I'm saying there's a chance. I'm saying don't get your hopes up.
Oh, I learned not to get my hopes up with Star Wars.
I would,
all of this is to say, if he were a former Jedi, it seems like he'd probably at least have his lightsaber. Of course,
but what happens if he's like Ezra, where that actually is just a holster that then turns into a curved lightsaber, like Dooku?
Okay, that'd be epic, actually. If he, you just think that's the hammer up there and by the trigger. It's actually the button to pull the whole thing out and leave the holster on his belt. And
it's like, what are you doing? You're not even pointing that blaster at me. Yes, I know.
Yes, I know. All right, well, anyway, whatever amongst that crazy convoluted speculation comes true, we will be discussing it ad nauseum here on the Fandom Podcast Network. What a piece of junk. For now, I'm shutting down the slideshow. And we will, unfortunately, have to turn to a much more somber note as we take a moment to say rest in peace to another Star Wars luminary. This time, a really, really, really important part of the Star Wars galaxy has unfortunately left us for the great beyond, and that is, of course, James Earl Jones, having passed away earlier this month. The voice of Darth Vader, perhaps one of, if not the most iconic villain in all of cinema. And so now we have lost all the components of the original Darth Vader because David Prowse, of course, had passed away some time ago, and now James Earl Jones has also passed at the age of 93. I did not realize that James Earl Jones was actually that old, but that is pretty impressive. And of course, while we all know him and revere him and fear him, let's be honest, as Darth Vader, Jones, of course, had an enormous career well beyond Star Wars, both before and after. And if I may add a moment of levity to a very somber and sad passing, one of my favorite James Earl Jones bits was as a result of The Simpsons, because, of course, he lent his voice talents to the animated series The Simpsons as Bleeding Gums Murphy, Lisa Simpson's saxophone mentor. And there's an episode in The Simpsons in which Bleeding Gums Murphy has died and appears to Lisa in a cloud in the sky, in a night sky, and to appear from beyond the grave to offer Lisa some motivation. And before he can finish saying what he's trying to say, another cloud appears beside him that is Mufasa, talking to Simba. And another cloud appears beside Mufasa that is Darth Vader, talking to Luke. And then yet another cloud appears, and it's just James Earl Jones. And instead of imparting wisdom, he simply says, "This is CNN." I laughed until I cried when I saw that episode of The Simpsons, implying that every voice of James Earl Jones exists somewhere as a large cloud silhouette, even the ones where he is simply hawking product or another service. So, yes, pour one out for James Earl Jones. Guys, Vader is, of course, the thing I think of most when I think of James Earl Jones. What about you, Derrick? Is that your James Earl Jones of choice, or do you think more of Mufasa or something else?
Mr. Myrtle from The Sandlot. That is probably one of my most favorite iconic moments of James Earl Jones. Obviously, Darth Vader, right? I mean, that is. But actually seeing him, I always think of him when he talks about good old George, Babe Ruth.
Yeah. Yes.
As you know, and he used to do that when he talks to the kids when they finally go in and talk to him when they're trying to get the ball from Hercules, the dog on the other side of the fence. No, that's just, like I said, when I picture James Earl Jones, like I said, doing scenes, not, the voice acting, because again, that is probably one of the most iconic voices ever in cinema history. That'll be going on, for our, our generations, our parents' generations, and then our probably grandparents' generations for as long as he's been doing that. And for some of our kids, right? So I'm sure, Scott, your boys obviously very well know James Earl Jones and could identify his voice if they heard it.
Yes, totally. It's interesting that you mentioned The Sandlot. When I saw The Sandlot, great film, I loved it, and James Earl Jones showed up as the old guy, all I could think about was how, wait, is this a joke about Field of Dreams? Because remember in Field of Dreams, James Earl Jones is there as a baseball player and baseball aficionado as well. And I was like, well, this is really clever. Although back then we didn't have the internet as much. I mean, it was 1993. We had internet, but it was dial-up and what have you. And so I was just not as media aware, but I definitely noticed, oh, it's like the guy from Field of Dreams. A role that was small, but of course James Earl Jones ate it up and really, made it an integral part of Field of Dreams. Nathan, what do you think about when you think of James Earl Jones?
Yeah, so it's interesting. I'm not very familiar with The Sandlot, and when you said that, I thought it was Field of Dreams that he was in, not The Sandlot. So,
it's both.
It's both. Of course, I remember him as the king in his wonderful work, Coming to America. Mm-hmm. No, wait, sorry. The Lion King. He was in Coming to America as the king.
He was, but I would not accept that you thought of an Eddie Murphy film.
I know Shrek. Okay, yeah, you're right. I'm not that much on Eddie Murphy films, but not that he's bad or anything. It's just not something I'm very knowledgeable about. But yeah, to me, he's the voice more than anything else, and that goes for both Darth Vader and Mufasa. He has just that iconic voice for both of those characters. That's what I think of for him.
Yeah, totally. And I want to mention one other James Earl Jones performance that was seminal to me as an 80s kid from Gen X that might have been, not might have been, but probably was well before both of you guys' time. That is Thulsa Doom in the original Conan the Barbarian with Arnold Schwarzenegger as the Sumerian, which I know you've both seen. Actually, Nathan, have you seen Conan the Barbarian with Arnold?
No, I have not.
Well, I need to show that to you.
I have been wondering how long it would be before you show that to me.
Yeah, I need to show it to you. I have it on DVD and VHS. But Derrick, I'm sure you've watched Conan after the fact. And Thulsa Doom makes the first Conan, so the one that is Conan the Barbarian, instead of Conan the Destroyer. Conan the Barbarian, infinitely a superior film to The Destroyer, and as much as it pains me, a much superior film to Red Sonja, which is basically in that same universe.
Yeah, Red Sonja was...
We didn't have permission to call Arnold Conan in Red Sonja, so he has a different name, but he is Conan by any other name. And just the reason I think that both of those films pale in comparison to Conan the Barbarian is, of course, the strong villain. You got to have a good villain. James Earl Jones absolutely slays as Thulsa Doom, evil snake necromancer guy. So really awesome, Nathan. You'll have to watch it. Maybe you can watch it sometime right before we get ready to play Pathfinder or D&D, because it is an absolute. Here's how you could do a whole D&D campaign with these characters.
Okay, so it needs to be a little while before we play Pathfinder or D&D so that I can make that campaign.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
But
In fact, in second edition D&D, barbarians work the way that they do because of Conan. All right.
Yes.
Yes, Derrick.
But I was going to say the other one is Admiral Greer in The Hunt for Red October and the Patriot Games. So
yeah,
definitely most very well known. Obviously, So he was also the first celebrity guest on Sesame Street.
Oh yeah. That was even before my time, I'm pretty sure.
I don't have to take a look at when it was, but yeah. But it was a really weird like little skit that he had to do because he did the ABCs, but obviously with his voice, it is kind of creepy, and he's young. He's young, like not to say and it's just he's still bald back then, and it was just like okay.
Yep.
So I just looked up to see what he might be in that I had forgotten about, and I didn't realize he was in Doctor Strangelove.
Mm-hmm. Yes, a long time ago.
Which I have seen that, but it has been a long time since I've seen it, so I had forgotten that he was in it, or probably just never realized that it was him. When I watched it. He was also in Cry the Beloved Country, which is about South Africa. A South African writer, it's based on a novel by the South African writer Alan Paton, which I don't really remember that movie, but I do remember seeing that movie in college in my freshman English class because we had we had a paper that we did based on that movie, if I recall correctly. And the paper was about what gives people power. And everyone else in the class wrote about the same thing. I can't remember exactly what they wrote about, but I wrote about communication because in that movie, the people who are in power do a lot to make sure that the main characters cannot spread their message.
Interesting.
Now,
so yes,
I hope that I'm not mixing things up, but I'm
career.
pretty sure that was the movie.
Well, of course, James Earl Jones will be missed by Star Wars fans. I'm both happy and somewhat trepidatious about the idea that we have enough of his voice as Darth Vader recorded that they may end up, and they have done a little bit of already, simulating his lines as Vader in future productions. I could see Lucasfilm being, and Disney in general, being keen on reutilizing his voice because we don't want Vader to sound too different. But Vader's voice is processed so much that I think it would be fine if we let the guy who did Vader's voice in Rebels and in the Clone Wars episodes where we saw Vader, I think there were a couple where he spoke. Maybe he just walked.
Well, but anyway, James Earl Jones is credited for that too, though. He is credited for the Darth Vader voice in Rebels, in Rogue One.
I thought it was only credited for Vader in one episode of Rebels.
No, it says
because there was a big primetime special. Oh, maybe
he's
so.
also
I thought there was another person.
Yeah, he's also credited for in the Rise of Skywalker. It says here, and credited for Obi-Wan Kenobi. So but don't forget, to your point. It's not just somebody else, but they can obviously AI it so easily nowadays. There's so much of James Earl Jones recorded out there from, like I said, his first movie debut to what he did before his passing. And to your point, he is Darth Vader is partially a robot cybernetic, so to have it be done by a robot would be kind of ironic. So,
Yes.
Importantly, you never see his mouth move, and I think that will help
Right.
a lot if they're trying to
Right.
use the piece together James Earl Jones voice, because that's what often throws me off when they try to dub in somebody's voice. If it doesn't exactly match the movement of the lips, I can tell. But with Vader, it does not matter. I was trying to see. I think Vader himself only has one episode in the Clone Wars where he talks. We see him at the very end of Clone Wars, but he doesn't say anything.
That's right. In the final episode, he's just walking around.
Yeah, I think we may hear him in the Mortis trilogy, but I'm trying to remember. I know we see a vision of the mask, but I can't remember if we hear any dialogue from that. I was trying to find if we did, and I don't think we did, honestly.
So, of course, also reusing his voice now that he's passed depends on whatever arrangement they had with his estate, and I think might also depend on the outcome of a recent lawsuit that one of the friends of Peter Cushing has sued Lucasfilm about recreating Tarkin for Rogue One. Even though that's been a number of years ago now, and you would think that Disney, of all people, would have their ducks in a row, their Donald ducks in a row, when they're having to put together legal rights to the images of a performer. But it appears that even though the estate of Cushing signed off on it, you guys may have heard about this in the news, one of Cushing's friends, who still owns a movie production company, had a contract with Peter before he passed away where he, the friend, had rights in perpetuity to his likeness after his death when it comes to film production. And so the estate didn't have the authority to give permission to Lucasfilm.
Did the estate even know, though?
Rules.
That's the question.
Did they even know? That is the question. We will see how a judge rules on it.
Because, I mean, at that point, if they didn't know about it, then, I mean, anybody can, quote unquote, fake a signature nowadays and all that stuff. So
That's true. And you kind of have to wonder, why did it take the guy so long to launch this lawsuit?
Yeah, that is
why
my
didn't
question.
he do it closer to Rogue One's theatrical release, which was quite some time ago, as much as it pains us to realize that. When did Rogue One come out?
And it's not like Peter Cushing's likeness was a small part of that. It was a big deal that they got.
2017 or 18, I think, was Rogue One. I think it's 18, but
so 6 or 7 years.
Well, according to IMDb, it was actually 16.
No,
2016.
8 years.
Rogue One. Oh. 8 years ago.
Oh.
So, yeah, who knows? Anyways, well, whatever the result of that lawsuit, we'll be sure to talk about it on another episode. And we will, of course, be sure to talk about the late, great James Earl Jones as Star Wars continues to roll on because, like I said, Vader, perhaps the most iconic villain in all of cinema, and he is not going anywhere. We still will have plenty of Galactic Civil War era stories that are being told here in the Lucasfilm as part of Disney era, and so I'm sure that we will continue to see Darth Vader for years to come. Rest in peace, James Earl Jones, and we'll be right back after this commercial break.
Thank you for listening. We hope you're enjoying this podcast. Here are the other great shows on the Fandom Podcast Network. Culture Clash, where we discuss the latest in entertainment and pop culture. Blooded Kings, our show covering the entire Highlander universe. Couch Potato Theater, we celebrate our favorite movies. And Time Warp, our Fandom Flashback show discussing a year in movies and our favorite retro movie, TV, and pop culture topics. Good Evening, discussing all things Alfred Hitchcock. Hair Metal Podcast, we cover the rock metal music of the 80s and early 90s. Type 40, a Doctor Who podcast, discussing the time-traveling Doctor Who universe. Lethal Mullet, an action film podcast covering the 80s, 90s, and beyond. Also, check out the Lethal Mullet Network for more great podcasts. What a Piece of Junk, our Star Wars podcast. Making Treks, a Star Trek podcast with a deep dive into the final frontier. The Fandom Show, our Fandom Podcast Network live YouTube show discussing the hottest topics in fandom. the True Believers MCU podcast discussing the Marvel Cinematic and Television Universe, Union Federation, our Star Trek, and the Orville Show. And we're proud to welcome the BQN Network to the Fandom Podcast Network. Please visit our friends on the BQN Network, a Star Trek Universe podcast that also includes your favorite topics, movies, history, superheroes, and more. You can find the Fandom Podcast Network on YouTube. The Fandom Podcast Network is also on all major podcast platforms. The Fandom Podcast Network audio master feed is on Podbean at fpnet.podbean.com. You can find the Fandom Podcast Network on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. You can email us at fandompodcastnetwork@gmail.com. Thank you so much for listening, and remember, respect others and enjoy your fandom.
All right, thanks very much, Kevin. Well, guys, before we close out this episode of the podcast, I think we should just take a moment to talk about the fact that Star Wars The Acolyte will not be getting a second season. Much like the Book of Boba Fett, I felt, boo indeed. I am sad. I wanted to see what was going to happen with Master Vernestra, and of course Yoda being introduced at the end of the final episode was a tantalizing bit. But I think much like Book of Boba Fett, the pacing was not quite there for this show. I know we've talked a little bit in the past when we analyzed each individual episode of The Acolyte that we had this or that notes about the writing quality, or maybe just about the lack of exposition every so often. There were times in the show where even us, as big-time Star Wars fans and media consumers for decades, didn't really know what was going on or what we were supposed to think. If you were doing a mystery show, and this was a bit like a Star Wars mystery show, it's okay sometimes for the audience to feel a bit lost, but if I may make a reference to Lost from J.J. Abrams, too many mystery boxes and not enough resolution leaves an audience feeling dissatisfied instead of tantalized. And I feel like that is the main overall problem with The Acolyte. The show didn't quite know what it was trying to do, and in today's media environment, unlike, say, the 1980s or even the 1960s, when you had shows like Star Trek trying to find their footing, given multiple seasons in order to do that, you just don't get multiple seasons to find your footing these days. And so this show is not coming back because it didn't find its footing fast enough. I will miss it, but at the same time, I'm not crying into my blue milk over the fact that there's not going to be a season 2. I would have liked it. I would have enjoyed it. I would have watched it. I'm not crushed that it isn't happening, and I am not that surprised that it isn't happening. Derrick, what do you think?
So obviously, as we kind of talked about it, right? Like, I thought there was some good potential there. There was a good story. I liked what they were doing. I again am fine with this High Republic that the Disney World is wanted to explore. And unfortunately, though, like some of the things you talked about, I think the biggest thing that I dislike, and this is just in general with Disney Star Wars right now, if I'm not getting 12 episodes and they're not the 46 to 50 plus minutes each episode, what are you even doing then? Just make a 2-hour movie directly for Disney, straight to D plus, and we'll call it that, because this story was obviously 6 episodes if we talked about, and then they wanted to spread it over 8. But you just can't do anything with that. There's nothing there. It's pacing is terrible. It's out of whack. They're not completing the stories. There's all these, end pieces, dangling threads that, we're going to bank on getting a season 2. Well, no, you're not, because unfortunately that's not how it works anymore. It feels like,
Right.
Because in the streaming world specifically, now, maybe if it was to network television outside of, something doing really bad, at least it seems like network television, you're getting 20 plus episode commitments from folks. When you at least get to that point. But in the streaming world, you get your one season and that's it. So they need to do it where you tell a complete story and that's it. If you get a season 2, you are lucky. and then you can go and explore those characters further. But at this point, Disney, and it's no different than what they've been doing with the MCU in some degree, right? Like they're just trying to be clever and they're outsmarting themselves, and it's just off-putting to us. I mean, me personally, I'm fine if they want to come back to, you mentioned it at the beginning, where like, well, maybe at some point they'll come back to this, right? Maybe it's 10, 15 years, a little too late. But really, if they want to redeem and bring people in, just go ahead, first episode of season 2, or call it a different series, but give us Kamir and give us May and give us Osha, and they just kill them all. That's what Darth Plagueis does. He kills all 3 of them, and we get the Darth Plagueis series. Like, that would be something that would be wild and crazy, and people would be like, oh my goodness. And then you could start writing your Darth Plagueis thing, right? Like, because whatever you're going to do with that, that's what they should be focused on then. And at least that way they could say, hey, we closed the book on the Acolyte and we moved on.
Yeah, we're totally done with this, and at least there was some kind of resolution. I think that, it's a situation you were talking about of, we felt like this was really only 6 episodes worth of story, because it seems like it might have been, this was going to be a film. This was a feature film script. And they have done streaming series where you feel like this was a feature film script.
Obi-Wan Kenobi.
That they extended. Obi-Wan Kenobi and the Book of Boba Fett. Let's be honest. That felt a little bit like it could have been a Boba Fett film. But then they added some stuff to it. Right?
Well, Book of Boba Fett got rewritten because of them having to force Grogu back into the script. So Book of Boba Fett got completely redone because of that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
there's that too. But it felt like it could have easily have been whatever Josh Trank was going to do for his Boba Fett movie. First, the beginnings of the story of, we find out how Boba Fett survived the Sarlacc pit. He goes and talks to Bib Fortuna and kills him. He installs himself as the new crime boss. That could have been the whole movie, right?
Yeah, not argue with you on that. That it definitely, if you snip it together as now, because again, you take 2.5 episodes out of Din and Grogu, but to be fair, that could have been 2.5 episodes of actual like Book of Boba Fett stuff, though, right? Where it would have been good character development.
Yeah. But I don't think it would have been. I think if they didn't have that, they would have just made Book of Boba Fett shorter.
It was already 7 episodes.
I know.
Yeah. But that's what I'm saying. I think it began life as a feature film, and they had to puff it up, and we can tell that it was puffed up.
And I think some of the stuff with the Tusken Raiders was probably added. Some of the stuff that were like, why is this here? Well, it's here because we need the time so that we can make this a series instead of a 2-hour movie.
Which I'm not arguing, could have been fine with it, but we could have also gotten the stuff that they might have just completely etched out, because we could have actually gotten the other episodes of earlier Boba, where you could have gotten something with him being on a bounty hunter hunt, right? You could have gotten other flashbacks of stuff that they're just like, well, we don't need these now because we got to fit in. Again, I'm not going to argue with you guys, not because I agree with you, right? It definitely, for what story was there, could have easily told it in an hour and a half, 2-hour movie. 100% agree with you. Not going to argue on that portion. Just saying there could have been more. We just don't know, right? Because at this point, that was what was coming down from the execs. So,
Nathan, your final thoughts on The Acolyte?
Well, I am obviously very disappointed that we're not getting a season 2. I did have some issues with season 1. It definitely was not a perfect show. We've talked about a lot of those issues on this podcast, so I'm not going to go over all of them. But I think it was worth getting a season 2 of it. My biggest disappointment with not getting a season 2 is this was our first series that didn't take place somewhere within the Skywalker saga. And we on this podcast have been talking so much about how we want stories that aren't Skywalker saga stories. We want things that are set in different time periods. And our first foray into that ended up failing. And some of that was on the show itself. Some of that was on a lot of misplaced hate. Yeah. And a lot of the trolls will tell you that, no, you told us not to watch this, and so we didn't, and that's why it's being canceled. But there was a lot of review bombing to the point where other shows named Acolyte got review bombed because people who review bomb aren't always smart enough to know what show they're review bombing.
Or, of course, robots aren't smart enough to know what show they're review bombing.
Yeah, it said Acolyte, so I review bombed it. Wrong Acolyte. That happened to a couple of different shows. So, yeah, it absolutely happened. And there were a lot of things like, oh, there's fire in space. This show is terrible because I can't suspend my disbelief for Star Wars, which has so much stuff that does not match real world physics and has since the 1970s. The Force, X-Wings banking in space,
Space wizards.
Leia and Han walking out into an asteroid with nothing but rebreathers. I mean, come on. We don't watch Star Wars for the space realism. If there's a fire that conceivably, the fuel from the ship is feeding that fire, I don't care that it doesn't look like what fire would actually look like in space. It's not even the first time we've seen fire in space in Star Wars.
Bingo.
When the
say nothing
executor,
of other fires in space in other shows.
Yeah, when the executor ran into the second Death Star, big boom. Where did that come from? Doesn't really make sense.
Well, you see, when an object is as large as the Death Star, it has its own air envelope in space, and the phlogiston, which makes up most of wild space, is extremely flammable. Wait, no. I'm sorry, that's Spelljammer. That's Spelljammer from Dungeons and
But
Dragons.
yeah, close enough. I mean, this is space fantasy. It doesn't need science fiction levels of explanations for things like that. So I found a lot of the complaints to basically be baseless. And I feel like a lot of those complaints are part of what led to not getting a season 2, which not only means that these stories don't really get finished or have to be finished in some other way, it means I'm concerned that we'll never get any Star Wars ever again that is not in the Skywalker saga, at least not as far as a live action movie or television show goes.
I'm with you.
It's a real danger.
I mean,
But anyway,
I wish they had gone the other way and learned their lessons from George Lucas doing prequels and people complaining so much about how those didn't fit with the established canon of the original movies, and instead said, well, let's set this several hundred years in the future where it doesn't really matter. It's the same problem that Enterprise had with Star Trek.
Yeah.
They were so restricted because, well, we can't do this. It'll mess with the canon. Whereas when they went to the future with the Next Generation, they were free to do whatever they needed to do.
but I will say Andor and Strange New Worlds are working great.
It can work great.
You just have to get good writers. That's
You
the
have
number one.
you have to do it really well, and you have to really respect the canon. And in the case of Star Wars, you have to respect what people think is canon, even if it isn't. Such as Ki-Adi-Mundi's canonical birth date was never set, but people got upset about it.
I still think that's a running gag, though.
I think it is. Oh, it absolutely is a running gag that Ki-Adi-Mundi is always wrong about the Sith. And that's why they use Ki-Adi-Mundi, but so many people did not get the joke.
Yeah.
Perhaps on purpose. But
I also think if they would have had Khmer as the front character, they probably would have been a bit more tolerant, because let's be honest, half the people that were review bombing was because it was a black woman lesbian that was doing it. So
yes.
Yeah.
Although I have to point out that I feel like at the end of the day, neither Osha nor May were lesbians. Like,
No.
They were both somewhat
No,
enamored
it's
of
the actress.
but
is
the
what I'm
mom.
saying. The actress.
Oh, the actress. Okay,
Yeah.
I didn't even
Yeah,
know
it's
that.
the
because
actress.
I don't care.
Well,
Yeah. I was
wasn't
thinking you
sure
meant
about
their parents.
I wasn't sure about the actress for May and Osha, but I know the showrunner and the actress for Venestra are not only lesbian, but together.
and of course, Mother Coral and Mother Talzin aren't Mother Talzin.
Well, it's Night Sisters, but even that is
Yeah.
canon.
Oh, right. And a little nebulous as to what they're actually doing. Don't look too close at it.
And let's be honest, it's no different than Guess Who's Doing It Right Now. No spoiler alert to anyone, but watch Agatha all along, and it's what witches do. So it's not like it's not already in real world history.
Only seen the first episode, so not too many spoilers there, please.
No, I'm not going any further. I'm just saying, like,
All right.
witches in general is all I'm saying. Have always been.
Well, the whole concept of witchcraft from at least the
yes.
ancient, the old European way, was about women who didn't want to follow the patriarchy,
Correct.
which inevitably leads to everyone accusing them of being lesbians, even if they aren't.
Yep. And that's part of what makes you a witch.
Yeah.
Or it can be,
But that's what I'm saying. So,
Honestly,
like, they
practically
do it
anything,
off
but-
of real history, and people still get upset about it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, anyway, speaking of the more things change, the more they stay the same, let's do Derrick's favorite part of the show, and that is what Star Wars t-shirt or merchandise do we have this week? I'll go first because I'm off subject, as you'll see in a few seconds, but that's mainly because I wasn't paying attention to what the other guys were talking about. I have a Star Wars t-shirt, and it is one of my favorite, speaking of really meta jokes, WrestleMania 2, which is a reference, of course, to WrestleMania, in this case 6, because this t-shirt of Zam Wessel from Attack of the Clones is a direct rip-off or lovingly crafted parody of the WrestleMania 6 t-shirt, right down to the grid in the background, a very 80s looking thing, very 90s looking thing, and the pastel color palette, and the little tiny portraits of people looking back over at the camera. That's exactly what was going on the WrestleMania 6 t-shirt with Ultimate Warrior, Big Boss Man, and so forth. And so when I saw this shirt at a Star Wars Celebration store online some years ago, I begged and pleaded every Star Wars fan that I knew who was going anywhere near Celebration to get me the shirt, and Terry delivered. Thank you once again, Terry. And this is not the first time that she's going to be mentioned in this segment of this podcast. Go ahead, Nathan. What do you got?
Well, yesterday in Indian Trail, North Carolina, we had the Muggles Market, which is a gathering of all the, well, maybe not all, but several of the nerdy vendors in the area. And Terry was there, and she was selling and gave to me this pin with
Hey.
Chewbacca on it. Yay!
Here, let me embiggenate the image there for those at home. Yes, Chewie on a ink pen. Good times.
Yes, so this is one of those pins that it's got the pin in the middle here, and you can slide little charms onto it. And we've got a Chewbacca themed one, and it's Chewbacca on the top. I mean, what could be better for me than a Chewbacca pin? So I'll be taking this to work and using it. No, I won't. I take it back. I'd lose it there. I'm going to leave this here and use it here.
You could use it to make notes for our DC-20 role-playing game adventure coming up this Saturday.
Yes, I can.
More D&D.
Or D&D, yes. But Nathan's not the only person on this episode of the podcast with a Star Wars pin. Somehow the guy who gets paid to write on the show, missed the pin memo. But Derrick, what do you got?
I have just one, but two lightsaber pens. Mm-hmm.
But the pin is mightier than the sword, or in this case, mightier than the laser sword.
They're both.
What's mightier than a sword? A pin. What's mightier than a pin? A sword pin.
Yeah, so the wife bought me these a couple of weeks ago, and I just happened to have them. So when Nathan had to show his Wookiee pen, I had to say, I've got two as well. So
Hey, here's a question about the lightsaber pins. Do they write blue and red?
actually, I don't think they do. I think they're both just black. Let me test the red one. It is just black. Both.
That's
that would have been super thematic if they wrote their colors, but hey.
To be fair, most people don't write in red pen anymore, unless if you're a teacher.
No.
And even then, they don't.
Even
because
most teachers don't do that.
Yeah, it's all electronic on your tablet or your laptop.
Even when I edit reporters' stories, I don't use a red pen anymore. I just kind of highlight things. Or I don't even tell them. I just change it and be like, here's an update on the changes I made to your document.
I admit I do use red pens to mark up people's purchase card statements at work.
Well, you have to do that.
Really?
Any error. Yeah. Oh no, I don't have to do that. I mean, I have to
I was about
mark
to say,
up the purchase card.
surely you could just do it digitally.
Sadly, no.
They need a hard copy.
Well, we don't use digital copies of the purchase card statements, and that's all I'm going to say on that. I choose to use a red pen when I'm marking them up. I'm not required to use red, but that's my choice. Yeah.
I do have a Star Wars shirt on, but it's the one I always wear when I'm not doing it, which is not today.
Collapsed at good times. Well, anyways, if you guys out there want your own cool What a Piece of Junk t-shirt, or mousepad, or iPad cover, or coffee mug, head on over to tpublic.com and search up the Fandom Podcast Network in the user bar so that you can see all of the merch from our show, as well as all the other great shows here on the FPN. And speaking of the FPN, Nathan, where can people find our show out there on the interwebs?
You can find us pretty much anywhere you can find podcasts. You can, of course, find us at fpnet.podbean.com. That is our master feed. But you can also find us on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Google Play, and, of course, YouTube, because we're old and we still use YouTube. You can find us on Facebook, What a Piece of Junk, a Star Wars podcast, because we're old and we still use Facebook. You can email us at whatapieceofjunkpod@gmail.com. We don't really use Twitter, but technically we exist at What Wars. On Instagram, you can find the entire podcast network at Fandom Podcast Network. And Derrick, can you tell us about reviews, Apple and podcast and otherwise?
Yeah, we really appreciate when people leave us reviews, because if you don't want us to be canceled like the Acolyte, we'd appreciate it. It doesn't have to be a 5-star, though those are the best, because obviously it helps with the logarithm, and hopefully we don't have to worry about bots. But if you want to review bomb us and cancel us anyways, we'll take 1-star reviews as well. At least it's a review. But yeah, just give us a review, as Nathan mentioned, on any platform, whether that's on streaming or whether that's through YouTube, whatever it might be. Leave us a review. We appreciate it. Hit us up also on Facebook. Tell us what you want us to talk about, and we'll bring your name up.
Yep. Well, anyways, thanks for joining us on this episode, you guys. As always, let us know what we can do to make the show better and more enjoyable for you. But until then, please always respect each other and always respect each other's fandom. All right, Nathan, punch it.